Here I am, once again, coming out to bat for an animated Netflix film that seemingly no one is talking about. When I did a trailer breakdown for this movie last week, there were a few comments that I was essentially doing Netflix's marketing for them, and you know what? It's true! People often call me a shill, and sometimes I actually wish that was true. Where's my pile of money, Netflix? I'm waiting. The latest animated endeavour by Netflix, another Roald Dahl adaptation, this time of the Twits. As I've mentioned previously, I do remember reading this book, but to be perfectly honest, it didn't stick with me. I was more a Charlie and the Chocolate Factory or a James and the Giant Peach type of kid. Even amongst the Dahl classics, it's not one that you often hear about frequently, so I assumed that this movie would be a harmless adaptation. How silly of me, because of course it isn't. Since the trailer release, there's been more and more critics coming out of the woodwork who seemingly have never mentioned this book before in online circles to complain about the change being made for the movie. Long-time viewers of this channel will know that I do love to be a contrarian when it comes to internet opinions, and today seems to be no different. In this video, I'll be reviewing the Twits and telling you why I think it's actually quite great. Fair warning, this review is going to have some pretty in-depth spoilers, so if you care about that sort of thing, I strongly suggest going to watch the movie right this second. Then come back and watch the review. If not, well, just don't be upset when you hear about how awesome this movie is, and you didn't get to experience it yourself first. If you watched my trailer breakdown, you'll know that I had some previous grievances. Not many, just some silly analysis of the crumbs we were given, my hope that the humour wasn't lame, and I felt that the animation style that was used was a bit unnerving. Even then though, I could see the vision and I was intrigued to watch it, so the 17th of October came and I sat down in front of my TV to be pleasantly surprised. More than that, honestly, the film is easily rewatchable, charming, wholesome, and perfectly funny. My opinion, though, doesn't seem to be the consensus. Imagine my surprised Pikachu face when I opened Rotten Tomatoes and was blasted with a mediocre reception. That wasn't even the worst of it, though. The words such as vile and revolting thrown around for sins such as, let me check, telling a story about empathy and kindness? To me, it's genuinely sad when someone is so unhappy about a movie that promotes positive messaging. How a wholesome story can genuinely offend a person is beyond my understanding. I'm not saying that every movie that has a positive mention of love or kindness immediately makes it a good movie, and I do think that sometimes stories can actually get that a bit wrong, like with Raya and the Last Dragon. However, I don't think the Twits commits those fallacies. At best, some of the lines can come across a little therapy speak in nature, but at the same time, I only think that's the case because you're flooded with it on social media, and a child who's watching this presumably hasn't been bombarded with that level of content. It's a bit like the Barbie speech about how women have it tough. You see those types of sentiments online all the time, and so it echoes in your ears a little bit, but that doesn't mean it isn't touching or isn't true. The audience score is barely better at a 64%, but again, it genuinely feels too low for this movie. I will concede that both of these scores are based off a very small data point, so things could change, but not without some very serious promoting, which Netflix has seemingly failed to do. It's up to me, I guess. Before I get into the review overall, I will acknowledge that some people have gripes over the faithfulness or lack thereof of the source material. I get being protective and wanting to see a story play out on screen that you've loved in a previous form. I feel that way too. However, just because something isn't accurate doesn't make it bad, and I think we're losing that distinction as time goes on. Fantastic Mr. Fox, for example, is another Roald Dahl classic, yet the movie is far more dissimilar to the books than The Twits is, and yet it's genuinely known as a cult classic. The How to Train Your Dragon films are incredibly different to the books, and yet they're massively praised. Even the first Percy Jackson movie, whilst being a condensed, watered-down version of the book, is still a fun and engaging movie. It seems that in this day and age, though, if an adaptation isn't page for page accurate, it's burned at the stake, and people who haven't even consumed the source material are going to blindly jump on the bandwagon for it supposedly being quote-unquote the correct opinion. There's a place for disappointment and genuine grievances, and then there's venturing into frothing in the mouth territory with no ability for nuance, and I fear once again, we're heading towards that. I've seen people mention that the moral of the story is too sickly sweet for Dahl, which I honestly beg to differ. Whilst these stories remain dark with very real elements of cruelty and peril, they're also very hopeful, and that kind people, specifically children, always win out in the end. The children not leaving the Twits to die a very painful death, in my opinion, fits with Dahl's MO. It's not like they didn't punish them or they didn't deserve the consequences of their actions, but there's a difference between standing up for what's right and going too far, and for me, that's a perfect message which fits right into Dahl's literature. Enough with people's negativity though. Now I want to dive into the actual movie and give my personal thoughts, and we'll start with the visuals. As I've mentioned previously, I wasn't a fan of the animation style when I first watched the trailer. It looked grungy and creepy. I just wasn't a fan. However, when I saw the film on Netflix, it was actually far more colourful and pleasing to watch. This happens to me sometimes. It was the same with Little Mermaid live action. I thought it looked dodgy in trailer form, but it actually looked kind of great in the cinema. I have no idea why this happens, but these studios should really look into it, because if it puts me off, a person who makes money off of seeing these movies, then I can imagine it has the same effect on others and could be a vital difference in getting a wider audience. I'm genuinely glad that I liked it too, because I enjoy that we're having a bit of an animated renaissance in the 2020s. Since Into the Spider-Verse in 2018, more studios have been experimenting in different styles, which is really fun to see. Sure, some are riding off the coattails of Spider-Verse and just emulating that, which again, I have no real issue with. The style doesn't need to be for one franchise only, but still, it doesn't feel like that's the only fresh style anymore, and it's just great to see. I want to reiterate that I very much enjoy traditional 3D style. I love how detailed and vibrant it is, and I'm not one of those people crying over that style being everywhere and ruining animation or bean mouths or whatever. I just like having more fresh stuff too, and since the Twits looks great, that's a success in my eyes. It accurately reflected the vibe of the story, but didn't venture too far into grunge where it would alienate your interest. It actually kind of reminded me of the 1996 adaptation of James and the Giant Peach, where it just teeters on the edge of feeling unsettling, but the wholesome characters win you over and kind of make you appreciate the style. So a tick for animation from me. Next is the sound, which includes soundtrack and acting, and we'll start with soundtrack. I genuinely loved it. I thought the songs were all really unique and well placed for maximum emotional impact. Obviously, the first one, We're Not Like Everyone Else, is great in the sense that it's fun and it sets up the Twits as some awful rednecks, but in an almost likeable way. Their pranks are objectively foul, but they are funny. Following on from that vibe is the song The Problem Is You, with a horde of adults ganging up on an orphan child and telling her that her opinions and thoughts are worthless, really kind of honing in on that feeling of being unwanted and unloved. Then you have Lullaby, which works really well as a tearjerker piece where they're singing to the orphans and giving them hope and love when all their lives they've been rejected and have had to have it all together. Finally, the end credits song Open the Door is this perfect wholesome ending and my personal favourite. I think they got the balance just right with the songs in the movie, not feeling overtly full of them and not having a song just for the sake of it. They all meant something and were all great. As for the acting, most was pretty standard. It was well done, but not Oscar level. I did like Emilia Clarke as the Firefly narrator. The actor for her character's son Jeremy was paired nicely too. I did really like Mr. Twit specifically, but that's probably because he was the only British character apart from the bugs in his beard. I have no problem with American characters, but I do have a slight bias when it comes to telling stories with particular origins. Since Roald Dahl's so quintessentially British, I was expecting this film to be set in the UK. I very quickly learned from the trailer that this wasn't going to be the case, but I knew that even though it wasn't my preference, it didn't mean it wasn't going to be a good movie. However, I can give extra points when the characters sound like how I imagine them to. Case in point, Mr. Twit. I don't think an American would be able to deliver the diarrhea line with the same level of humour that his particular accent could. Another special mention should go to Mr. Napkin, who was actually voiced by the director. He just sounded consistently out of breath and incredibly wimpy, which just added to his character. When I first watched the trailer, I thought that this guy must be the absolute worst because he seems completely useless, and he is, but he does have this charm about him. The best part of this is that the story knows it, because the children literally get adopted by magical monkeys at the end, taking complete ownership of the orphanage that he used to run, whilst also hiring him as a part-time au pair. They categorically show that whilst he means well, he should not be in charge of children except for the occasional babysitting job. The voice behind it all just really sells it. If he sounded normal, you'd think he was almost more sad or weird, but his nasally soft-spoken nature just gets the balance right. There's a great line in the movie that I think really shows this when he's getting hustled by the Twits, and he says,
"I'm a bit cash poor at the moment. My investments are primarily emotional."
It's so clever and funny. It actually reminds me a lot of Wes Anderson's tone in adapting Dahl. Just really fun. I suppose with visuals and audio out of the way, we can now dive into the story. We have the story start off with the Twits glued to the floor by their heads and left for dead as Pippa, the Firefly, begins to tell her son Jeremy about how the Twits got there in the first place. The Twits are introduced as a couple that have been married for a very long time and hate everything and everyone. They only love their theme park, which they built together, but of course, their idea of an amazing theme park is heinous and disgusting to everybody else. In their spare time, they're physically and emotionally cruel to one another. At this time, we also meet our two lead protagonists, Bisha and Bubsy, two orphan children who in everything but blood resemble brother and sister. Bubsy sees an ad for Twitlandia, which can I just say is seriously creative. It's definitely got some 80s/90s vibes with the word art, graphics and jingle. Just super fun. Anyway, Bubsy wants to go, and Bisha says that she'll take him before he leaves the orphanage with his adoptive family. At this point in time, the ad is still running as that day was its grand opening, which is when the Twits get shut down. Since the Twits have a particular talent for pulling cruel practical jokes, they decide to steal a liquid hot dog van and pump it into their local town's water tower as vengeance for their hazardous theme park being closed due to numerous health and safety violations. One of those violations literally being stinking of rancid hot dog meat. Honestly, this whole section's just great, and you get some classic Roald Dahl humour, and the introduction makes it clear the Twits are the villains, but you also can't help but think they're incredibly funny too. It's clear as well why they're still married, as even though it's stated many times about how they hate each other, they obviously do love one another too. When the pranks go well, such as the liquid hot dog meat exploding through the town's water system, they're physically affectionate with one another, and when they're both in serious trouble later down the road, they seek comfort by holding hands, etc. It makes them more nuanced and very interesting. Following on from that, we get more information on Bisha and Bubsy as she films him a goodbye video from the orphanage. It's obvious their bond is close and it's very sweet. However, this is cut short from their orphanage director Mr. Napkin running away from the liquid hot dog tsunami. Bisha runs down to save him, and in the midst of meeting him, we see that whilst he is well-meaning, he also emotionally trauma dumps on her. So, class act from Mr. Napkin. We get more exposition from a newsreel about the hot dog meat flood, about the town, and how it sucks because they get no more tourism due to their lake drying up. Conveniently, they have a local election coming up with the current mayor looking suspiciously like Dwight from The Office, and of course the twits are going to get mixed up in it. Until then though, we see Bubsy be rejected from his prospective family due to them worrying about him being contaminated by the hot dog meat flood, and therefore he wouldn't be the idyllic child they were hoping for. Bisha then reassures Bubsy that he's going to find his family soon, and that even her parents are coming back for her one day, which, heart-wrenching. This inspires her that people shouldn't be cruel to one another and that they should change things, so she decides to find the culprits that caused the hot dog meat flood. This doesn't really take long, as they literally see the twits driving the liquid hot dog meat truck outside their orphanage. So the pair decide to pay a visit to Twitlandia, where they manage to record them admitting guilt to their crimes because they were shut down. Good thing they were too. This place is seriously disgusting. The dirty mattress bouncy pit still gives me the shivers. Anyway, they decide to leave, but before they do, they discover the Mugglewumps, magical monkeys from Loompa-land that have been captured and forced to cry magical tears that power the theme park. Bisha and Bubsy are able to understand the animals because they're very sensitive children with deep empathy. Oh, now I'm crying magical tears. The Mugglewumps tell the kids that there's a key in the twits' house that could free them from their cage, but before they can do that, they're discovered by the twits. The pair then decide to go to the police and report them so they can come back and rescue them. We get a really funny scene where the news is reporting on the public announcement the twits committed the crimes, but the twits seem to believe that this means they're famous and are going to receive positive press. There's a knock at the door and they eagerly go out to receive their adoring fans, only for them to be swiftly arrested. Meanwhile, Bisha and Bubsy enter the twits' house in search of the keys to release the Mugglewumps, and they come across a toad that talks backwards except when he's in front of mirrors. He also happens to be from Loompa-land and is being held prisoner by the twits. They decide to free him too, and whilst the children are searching the house, the twits are immediately released on bail because some people believe they're the salvation to their dying town. Including the people that just rejected Bubsy, by the way, for supposedly being contaminated by hot dog water. It is genius though, isn't it? The hypocrisy and the willingness to follow absolute loons for a mere hope of a better life. I do love this analysis of the current political climate, and I'm just now realizing why there might be an undercurrent of negativity with this movie. It was the same with Don't Look Up as well. People get all in their feelings about particular messages and therefore label an entire movie as bad because of it. I suppose it's the same as the lesson the movie's trying to put forth. When people want something to be true, in this case for the movie to be bad because they don't like being made fun of, they're going to convince themselves it's truly bad. In any case, the twits get back home, but Bisha and Bubsy still haven't found the keys. They end up in this house of horror maze as the twits summon their bed to them through this mechanical contraption that the kids are trapped on, but luckily they're not spotted. They find the keys around Mr. Twit's neck, but accidentally wake him up, and so they have to bolt and manage to release the Mugglewumps and get away just in time. Unfortunately for them, they're tailed by the twits who confront Mr. Napkin and trick him out of the orphanage and his clothes in exchange for leaving the kids alone, which obviously they don't live up to. Luckily, these kids are smart and they devise a trap to get rid of the twits by making them fall out of their bedroom window. Somehow, falling multiple stories into a metal bin filled with liquid hot dog meat doesn't kill or injure them at all in any way, and they immediately try to storm the orphanage again, whilst Mr. Napkin apologizes for getting in their way. The twits attempt to manipulate Bisha into giving over the Mugglewumps and says that she has the grit to be a twit. However, she refuses and they make her feel bad, saying that she should feel grateful to even get an offer for adoption. They laugh at her for thinking her parents are going to come back for her and tell her that they too were abandoned by their parents, therefore she's going to end up just like them. She says that's not going to happen and that they're not allowed in the orphanage to begin with since it's run by the town, with the obvious clause that they would have to be the mayor to get access. They get kicked out and get scooped up by a construction truck. The kids and Mugglewumps throw a party to celebrate their success, whilst the twits plot their revenge. Following that, we see the mayor debate on TV, where we learn the twits are running for the role. They trick the current mayor into eating this revolting cake to prove that he cares about the town, which completely incapacitates him and makes him unable to argue his case, whilst the twits take over and sway the public. Bisha storms into the debate and tries to plead reason, but the lure of everybody magically becoming a billionaire is too strong, and they all blame her because she stole the Mugglewumps, who are the key to Twitlandia, and all of their success. And this all ends with Mayor John John's rear end exploding. Yes, his ass explodes. This genuinely happens. Bisha runs back to the orphanage and is consoled by Mary Mugglewump that she doesn't have to have it all together all the time, and she needs to depend on others too. She sings a lullaby to the children in the orphanage about being safe and happy, and really focuses on looking after Bisha. It's such a sweet moment, and really helps tell a great story about how a child can be a hero without having to be perfect and emotionally capable all the time. This sweetness is short-lived though, as the next morning the twits and a horde of townspeople come to storm the orphanage and take the Mugglewumps. They manage to fight back using Marty Mugglewump's ability to vomit Floorbnorbles, aka sentient stress balls, to sweep away all of their attackers. Mr. Napkin even joins in on the action by fighting the twits with Cheese Whiz. The twits won't be beaten that easily though, though, and they still have another plan. Bisha and Marty and Mary Mugglewump have another heart-to-heart where they make Bisha say that she's not going to fight the Twits on her own and that she deserves to be loved. I mean, come on, who's cutting the onions here? Honestly though, I have a feeling that some people might have thought this moment was a little bit hammy, but I personally think that comes from being a little bit uncomfortable with it. I initially felt that way too, and I also felt it was sweet, and on a rewatch, it genuinely feels organic and lovely. It's a good message and important for kids or anybody really to hear. Unfortunately, later on in the night, the orphanage gets a call, and it's Mr. Napkin on the phone telling Bisha that he's just met her parents at the bowling alley and they want to come and see her. He tells her to come to them, and it's just so sad. The message is very convincing, and using a voice changer set up earlier in the story, the Twits trick Bisha and lock her in the alley, whilst the rest of their cult literally pick up the orphanage building and carry it all the way to Twitlandia. The belief of soon becoming a billionaire, I guess, makes you super strong? I don't know. Anyway, Bisha breaks out and runs back to where the orphanage used to be, but finds it's gone. The Toad offers her wisdom that Bubsy, the Mugglewumps himself, and even Mr. Napkin are her true family. That family doesn't necessarily make up the people you're related to, but people that you love and care about and that do the same for you. Again, just incredibly wholesome. Invigorated, Bisha goes to rescue her family. Meanwhile, at Twitlandia, the Twits announce that they've adopted all the orphan children, and the Mugglewumps are back restoring power through Tears for Twitlandia. Bisha stops them though by using the Sweet Toad Toad's feet to make them behave the opposite to their usual disposition. They become extremely nice, freeing the children and the Mugglewumps and blowing up the entirety of Twitlandia. Initially, the children and Mugglewumps run to escape, only for Bisha to rally them together to stop the Twits for good. In her mind, the Twits will eventually go back to normal and will once again pose a threat to them, so they have to give them a taste of their own medicine. Once the Twits come to, they're tricked when entering back into their house that they're upside down. So to get right side back up, they stand on their heads. The only problem is that the children have put glue in their hair, so now they're stuck and left for dead. Once the children arrive back at the orphanage though, they lose the ability to communicate with the Mugglewumps because they've lost their deep empathy. I can imagine this made people angry and frustrated as well. I kind of figured that if this was the direction the movie was going to go, that some people would be upset by this because it's not exactly a popular opinion. The idea that because you disagree with somebody that gives you the moral right to be just as brutal in return is a favoured opinion in this day and age, especially if you supposedly have that moral high ground. I like this message though because it's not true kindness or good nature if you treat others terribly, no matter how awful they've been. It doesn't mean you can't stand up for yourself and do what's right, but you can't lower yourself to others' cruelty. It's nuanced and it has my seal of approval. So Bisha and Bubsy return to free them, and after thanking them for coming back with a clever fake out of a mock-up graduation cap, implying the Twits will have changed and grown, they immediately chase after them. I really like this, and it shows that you should still do good and treat others fairly, even if they'll never do the same for you. We have a glorious ending where Mr. Napkin carries back the orphanage single-handedly to its original position. The Mugglewumps sell their tears to a multinational corporation, which is then used to end all the world's fossil fuel use. They use the money from the tears to buy the orphanage and adopt all the children within it, and Mr. Napkin becomes a part-time babysitter. Bisha finally gets credit for her efforts and comes up with a solution to fill the old lake with the sentient stress balls, which returns Triprot to its former glory as the fun capital of the world. The Twits pull one last prank on each other, where Mr. Twit fools Mrs. Twit that she needs stretching, so he attaches her to some helium balloons only to cut the rope beneath her feet, forcing her to fly away. He doesn't get off that easily though, he flies off with her after she manages to snag him with her cane. Pippa and Jeremy escape from Mr. Twit's beard just in time, and the Twits fly all the way to Loompa where they're swallowed by some giant sweet toad. A perfect ending in my eyes. To me, this plot is a lot of fun. It has great pacing. I remember being shocked at how fast time was passing when I was watching it. I really do feel like at this point in time in writing this, it is criminally underrated. If you've gotten this far and you haven't seen it, please do yourself a favour and watch it. It's wholesome, it's fun, and it's another add to the catalogue of awesome Netflix animated movies. With all that being said though, these have just been my opinions, and now I'd like to hear yours. What did you think of the Twits if you've seen it? Do you like it? Hate it? I'm curious for your thoughts, so make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know.